Radical doubt and the limits of logic. The question this presentation aims to address is to what extent can the nature of knowledge withstand radical doubt, and do concepts such as what constitutes the limits of human comprehension and the possibility of logically alien thought challenge the beliefs held by Thomas Aquinas and René Descartes. This topic covers questions such as what can be doubted, what thoughts are impervious to doubt, can I really know anything at all, could something be controlling my mind, do logical impossibilities exist, how can I be certain of what I know, can I trust my own mind, and is it possible for the laws of logic to change, all of which are examples of radical doubt. But first, let's start off with a thought experiment. Say you wake up in a hospital-ish room. A doctor walks in and begins asking you a series of questions, one of which is what does 2 plus 2 equal? You automatically answer 4, to which the doctor shakes his head and replies that you've been part of a brain-tampering experiment, which is harmless. However, the result is that they implanted the false belief in you that 2 plus 2 equals 4. You, of course, refuse to believe this. So the doctor takes you out of the room you are in and leads you down the hallway to a door labeled 2. In that room, you see another patient and doctor, to which the question is asked, what does 2 plus 2 equal? The patient replies, 2, with the same conviction you did. Still refusing to believe this, the doctor leads you one door over to a room labeled 3, where you see again a patient and a doctor. The patient is asked what 2 plus 2 equals, and he replies, 3. The doctor then leads you to your room, which you see is labeled 4. He then gestures to the long hallway, continuing with each door a different number, 5, 6, 7, and so on. The question is if this is enough to make you doubt, even for a second, that 2 plus 2 is anything but 4, a sentiment which we will return to. One of the first major players in the realm of radical doubt is René Descartes. He used doubt to overcome doubt. In Chapter 2 of Gallagher's Philosophy of Knowledge, he described Descartes' process. If we systematically attempt to call into doubt as much of our knowledge as we possibly can, we will eventually reach a point that is impervious to doubt. Descartes found something he could doubt and continued systematically until all that was left was the existence of his own mind. This is where cogito ergo sum came from, meaning I think, therefore I exist, or the expanded cogito ergo sum cogitans, meaning I think, therefore I am a thinking being. A more recent philosopher by the name of Thomas Nagel took radical doubt in a different direction, stating, the simplest of such thoughts are immune to doubt. Such thoughts, like 2 plus 2 equaling 4, or that a square has 4 sides. Looking back to our thought experiment, Nagel would say it is impossible to doubt, even for a second, that 2 plus 2 is anything but 4. Nagel gives another example, that what if someone told you you only believe 2 plus 2 is 4 because you had a crush on your math teacher in the 2nd grade and you wanted to believe everything she told you? Nagel says this is still powerless to make you reconsider that 2 plus 2 is anything but 4. He holds this belief because he claims that nothing purely external can cause you to doubt the laws of logic, i.e. what the sum of 2 plus 2 is. Nagel, however, does note that we can be mistaken in our judgments, but he says such mistakes must be corrected at the same level at which they are made, and this brings us to our next philosopher. W.V.Q. Quine had an idea of thought called the web of belief. His web of belief directly aligns with the idea that mistakes must be corrected at the level at which they are made. Now, there are 2 versions of Quine's web of belief, one referred to as the logic-friendly view and the other the radical view. The logic-friendly Quine holds that logical truths and even logical inferences are knowable a priori and are incorrigible and so immune to revision. This version thinks that no amount of empirical evidence can ever cause you to revise the laws of logic. On the other hand, the radical version of Quine does not exempt logic from these attacks. Logical truths and even inferences are themselves part of the web of belief. Everything, including logic, is up for grabs. For radical Quine, not only is it rational to alter our theory of logic, which has been done in the past by Aristotle and contemporary philosophers, he takes it further, adding that logical theory can be revised as a result of empirical considerations, as a response to surprising and difficult observations. This is a simple view of what Quine's web of belief looks like. The nodes on the outside are thoughts, ideas, and beliefs that are easier to revise as they are not embedded deeply within the web and with many other links. The nodes on the inside, however, require much more effort and consideration to change as they are linked to many other things. The lines connecting these nodes are experiences tied to each node. For Radical Quine, the laws of logic and other ideas would be near the center, extremely hard to challenge, but never impervious to doubt. Overall, it is viewed that Radical Quine had wandered into some dangerous areas. Many came to the conclusion that regardless of what Radical Quine came to hold, ideas such as the law of non-contradiction are empirically confirmed, and therefore cannot be subject to revision by mere empirical considerations. This aligns again with Nagel, who believed that the laws of logic cannot be doubted merely from the outside. Now, while Radical Quine is not taken too seriously, it did raise thoughts about the possibility of logically alien thought. We are going to look at two different views about this, one from St. Thomas Aquinas and the other back to René Descartes. Descartes thought the laws of logic were only contingently necessary, while Aquinas believed they were necessarily necessary. This began with the view that the scholastics believed in an omnipotent God for whom all things are possible. So if God is omnipotent, does that mean he has the power to abrogate the laws of logic? This line of thought led to questions about the limits of God's power, which both Aquinas and Descartes viewed as blasphemy. Aquinas attempted to rectify this by claiming, while there are limits to human comprehension, there are no limits for God. He claims that no word shall ever be impossible with God, for whatever implies a contradiction cannot be a word, because no intellect can possibly conceive of such a thing. Aquinas tried to argue that the descriptions of things that God cannot do, such as changing the laws of logic, are not, properly speaking, things which can be done at all. They are not a kind of thing. Aquinas argued the limits of human comprehension are not the limits of what is absolutely possible. He provides a depiction of human comprehension which he separates into two degrees of impossibility, the merely possible and the absolutely impossible. However, by drawing overlapping circles, his picture creates a space that is outside of God, which Descartes viewed as blasphemy. René Descartes indicated that the limits to our understanding are not the same as the limits to God's power. Quote, "In general, we can assert that God can do everything that is within our grasp, but not that he cannot do what is beyond our grasp." He continues, "It would be rash to think that our imagination reaches as far as his power." Descartes argued it is irrational to assume everything we can understand is equal to the things God is capable of doing, and that our imagination is the limit to the power of God. Just because we cannot comprehend or imagine something does not mean it is something that God cannot do. Just because the laws of logic bind humanity does not mean God is also bound by those same rules or frankly any rules at all. Our laws of logic are less than and dependent on the limitless power of God. Again, Descartes saw Aquinas' idea of human comprehension as blasphemous, so his view depicts one side of the line being logically possible and the other logically impossible. The barrier that lies between human understanding, Descartes says, is only limited to us, while God is on both sides of the possible and the impossible. He says, "Since God is a cause whose power surpasses the bounds of human understanding, and since the necessity of these truths do not exceed our knowledge, these truths are something less than and subject to the incomprehensible power of God." Descartes wanted to say that we think rightly when we think in accordance with the laws of logic, but he would not follow Aquinas in saying that they are necessarily necessary. While we cannot make sense of the possibility of a world where the laws of logic are different, we should still admit to their mere possibility of its existence. He therefore makes a distinction between our being able to conceive of such a world and our being able to conceive that such an inconceivable world could be. The former, the possibility of such a world, is not something we can comprehend, but is something that we apprehend. This is his reasoning for why he thinks the laws of logic are only contingently necessary and not necessarily necessary. He says, "In the same way we can touch a mountain with our hands, but we cannot put our arms around it, as we could put them around a tree or something else not too large for them. To grasp something is to embrace it in one's thoughts. To know something, it is sufficient to touch it with one's thoughts." Descartes conceded that in order for us to grasp a logical thought, our minds would have to be constituted otherwise. A crucial tenet of his view is that a logical contradiction is something naturally repugnant to our reason, which God did not give us the power to comprehend. Descartes continues, I do not think we should ever say of anything that cannot be brought about by God, for since every basis of truth depends on his omnipotence, I would not dare to say that God cannot make a mountain without a valley, or bring it about that 1 and 2 are not 3. I merely say that he has given me such a mind that I cannot conceive a mountain without a valley, or a sum of 1 and 2 which is not 3. Such things involve a contradiction in my conception. God could have made contradictions true together. We cannot comprehend this, although we can know it. We can acknowledge that God can do this without being able to fathom it. The attempt to do so would involve us thinking of a thought that is logically alien to us. The fact we cannot do this is due to an ultimately contingent fact of our minds, for it is how God made them. We cannot think of it in any other way. He finishes, that which is logically alien to our minds does not therefore represent an absolute impossibility, in Aquinas' sense, but only something which is incomprehensible to us and hence seems to our finite intellects to be absolutely impossible. To conclude, this project aimed to answer the question of to what extent can the nature of knowledge withstand radical doubt. Descartes' answer was that the mind is the only thing, whereas Thomas Nagel claimed that it was the simplest of thoughts, such as 2 + 2 = 4, and the laws of logic that withstand radical doubt. Moving on, we saw how thinkers such as Aquinas and Descartes viewed the laws of logic themselves, both addressing the question of whether or not they could be doubted. Aquinas held firmly that the laws of logic were necessarily necessary in every possible way, saying that it was our finite minds that failed to grasp that such ideas could even exist. Descartes took this further, saying that the laws of logic were contingently necessary, as, while he agreed we cannot think of such thoughts as they are naturally repugnant to our reasoning, that did not stop the possibility of it being true. Just because we cannot comprehend something does not mean it absolutely cannot exist.